We did it! We beat teen pregnancy and we beat teen alcoholism. Kids aren't really smoking weed either. They're just not doing reckless things, at least in the physical sense. But is that good? If these vices just vanished from youth culture, they had to be replaced with something, right? I'm here to tell you that it's actually foreboding for our society that teens aren't engaging in the rebellion that older generations of parents once had moral panics about. The data shows that there's been a huge collapse in alcohol consumption among teens, from 92% of 12th graders imbibing in 1980 to only 47% around 2020. When I think of the 1980s, I think of a quintessential American childhood. Latchkey kids running around the neighborhood with their friends, riding bikes without helmets, smoking cigarettes, blasting mixtapes, going to the arcade, getting into trouble maybe. Stranger Things, that hit series that just finished a couple months ago, was such a nostalgic blast from the past for those who grew up then, and a whole new world for Zoomers, that's my generation, 18 to 29-year-olds. It showed them what an analog childhood without advanced technology looks like. But the kids on bikes vibe today? More like kids glued to their iPads or their iPhones.
Fresh out of the womb, I'm watching Coco Melon. Got my snack in hand, open mouth coughing on my mom. Then she says, I'll take your iPad away. I say, woman, if you do that, you won't live to see another day.
The youth have always had a hunger for risk-taking historically, but smartphones and screens have kept kids today cocooned in an online world where they're safe, at least on the surface, but they simply aren't having as many formative life experiences. We now live in a bubble of Snapchat, the Find My Friends app that parents use to track their kids' locations, algorithms, doom scrolling, influencers, and all of this is taking place in a fake ether that is not reality. Of course, there are dangers online, whether it's catfishing on a dating app, or it's an AI chatbot that is encouraging you to be suicidal. But in a physical sense, life is no longer happening at your friend's house where you're building a DIY rocket or playing ding dong ditch or sneaking out at night to see your boyfriend. It's happening on the internet where the incentives are just not there to put yourself out there. Online, you can hide your flaws. Out in the open, at a high school dance, or hanging out with your friends, you get checked on who you are repeatedly by your peers. And it might not always be pretty, there's bullying and all of that, but it does build character and resilience undoubtedly. So why is teen drinking way down? Because that old physical world of adolescence is dead. Peak 1980s was cars, strip malls, basements with foosball tables, walkie-talkies, flirting with your crush at school, making out behind the bleachers, house parties when the parents are gone, and just a lot of social interaction. That's missing today. In a vacuum, sure, the fact that kids are staying away from alcohol, a serious toxin that of course is linked to traffic fatalities and DUIs and kids dying way too soon. Of course, it's a good thing that all of those negative side effects of drinking in youth are declining. But kids are also just not colliding with the forces that historically toughened them and cultured them, that encouraged a spirit of adventure and risk-taking socially. As a result, many teens don't know how to communicate. The government-run public school system is also to blame there, and a lot of them have social anxiety. Alcohol was part of this culture that included minimal parental supervision, mustering the courage to ask a girl out, getting embarrassed, learning how to cope with uncomfortable feelings, being independent and strong, and yes, there was also sex. Teens aren't doing much of any of this today, including drinking. But just because they're not getting drunk, that doesn't mean their mental health has improved. It's actually quite bad. Most teens credit social media with feeling more connected to friends, but roughly 1 in 5 say social media sites have hurt their mental health. Here's social psychologist Jonathan Haidt.
The millennials, their mental health is fine because they got through puberty before 2012. And so they're okay. But Gen Z went through puberty in the early 2010s or later. Everything changes in the technology environment. By 2015, the amount of time kids are spending with other kids is plummeting. They're not spending as much time anymore. The amount of exercise they get is dropping. The amount of sunlight they get is dropping. The number of books they read is dropping because this takes up everything. And if the phone is taking up 6 to 10 hours a day, depending on the subgroup you're talking about, If the phone for many kids is taking up literally half of their waking hours, that interferes with everything about development.
So teens are still abusing substances. It's just not the ones you think. But what they are indulging in is highly addictive, and it is rewiring their childhoods and their futures.
Attention fragmentation.
Yes.
It's the number one destroyer of the ability to attend, to focus, to develop executive function. So I think it's the number one destroyer of human potential because it is so widely used. It's the most addictive. It's the one that many of my students say they can't quit. Every year in my class of 35 students in my flourishing class, there are one or two who are on TikTok 6 hours a day. In other words, that's all they do is TikTok. It's hard to do their homework. They don't go see friends. It's just TikTok. It's really tragic.
And the mental health that the youth are struggling with, well, that's leading some kids to transgenderism. They don't have a sense of belonging so much anymore. There's less fellowship in person, so they're finding community in the gender craze, which is in very dark corners of the internet. They may not be smuggling handles of vodka into their treehouse behind their parents' backs or whatever, but they might be switching genders behind their parents' backs. There's a whole social contagion to transgenderism among adolescents as well. Narrowing in on the quitting alcohol part, though, there is a holistic, health-conscious reason that some young people are ditching it, and that is to be applauded.
When I realized that alcohol wasn't masking my insecurity or bringing out my best self, it was actually doing the opposite. I then started to feel this freedom of like, oh, I can just be myself and I have nothing to be insecure about. That's when it started to get easier, and I started to really feel the benefit of not being kind of tied to this drink.
That's actor Tom Holland. He's been in the Marvel movies Spider-Man, allegedly already married to Zendaya. Tom Holland testified that he didn't like the person he was when he was under the influence of alcohol, and that is very fair. There's a strong argument to be made that any kind of mind-altering substance that doesn't allow you to experience the world in all of its vibrancy and dynamism and color is something you should avoid. Life is so short. We shouldn't be trying to suppress uncomfortable feelings. We shouldn't be using alcohol as a social crutch or to numb ourselves through whatever we're going through. We should be feeling things fully and experiencing life fully. But I've just noticed among my Gen Z peers that sobriety is also a bit of a trend. It's very popular among Gen Z now to declare yourself as such and to share that on social media. There's a bit of a cool factor there. Maybe like getting a tattoo or a nose piercing was many years ago. Many bars offer an extensive mocktail selection these days to keep up with the demand. You see this emerging market of all these alternative beverages like dirty soda, which is just soda with interesting flavors and garnishes that make you think you're drinking something extra fun without it being alcohol. And I'm not dismissing any of that. But the point is that while underage drinking decades ago was dysfunctional and a bit dangerous, it was an adventure. It forced teens into social situations. Guys talk to girls and girls talk to guys. It was kind of like an initiation ritual of sorts. And alcohol is ultimately a poison, can be awful, I'm not sugarcoating that, but we used to have a culture of consuming it casually because teens were doing social things and alcohol was just usually a part of the equation. It helped foster a lot of those gatherings. And the fact that drinking has decreased so dramatically among young people is a symptom of just how isolated and insulated they've become.